A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles, Director of Partnerships here at Sweetfish Media. I am joined today by Reid Rasmussen. He is the co-founder and CEO of freshbenies. Reid, how you doing today?
Great day. How about yourself, Logan?
I am doing really well, Reid. Thank you so much for joining us. Excited to talk with you today about these 3 tips you have at different stages of growth where you may need to pivot or change. You've definitely seen some changes in your business working in an industry that is wrought with all sorts of change these days in the healthcare space. That being said, I'd love for you to share with our listeners a little bit about your background and what you and the team at freshbenies are up to these days.
Yeah. Healthcare has been my background from Canada originally, so saw a different healthcare system, but most of my career has been here in America. And I came up in America through the health insurance ranks. And 9 years ago, the Affordable Care Act was ramping up. And I started to recognize some things that were going to be happening here in America with healthcare that had gone on in Canada 25 years before. And that spark of insight prompted me to see that we were hitting, even then, the kinds of cost increases on health insurance were driving up the out-of-pocket costs to the members to a level that I thought was too high. 9 years ago, we'd all love to go back to our out-of-pocket costs from 9 years ago. And I saw that there were tools that would help people control their healthcare, but they weren't being delivered in a way that people were making use of. And so I built a business plan for the company that I was working for, and they said no twice. And so I quit my job. And 9 years ago this week, I started my company. And today, we serve about 80,000 households of people with our services that we roll together and call freshbenies. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list the last 4 years in a row, and we serve about 1,200 to 1,400 employers around the country.
That's fantastic. We noticed you guys on the Inc. Fastest growing list, and obviously multiple years running. You guys have learned some lessons in how to scale up. And congrats, by the way, on that entrepreneurial anniversary coming up here this week, as you mentioned there, Reid.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's jump in. Obviously, you've got some experience leading a fast-growing team, and you wanted to share today 3 tips to pivot and change as you continue to scale your business. And the first one I know you wanted to mention is around this idea of preparing in advance. Tell us a little bit about how you can prepare to pivot before you find yourself in those instances where you really need to make a large change.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's fun now when we look back, like it all sounds good now for a good entrepreneurial story, right? But 9 years ago, I wasn't very prepared for what I was going to be going into. I thought I was very prepared. I knew the industry. I'd been working in health insurance, and although freshbenies sits alongside health insurance, it's not health insurance, but I really believed I knew the industry. I had a plan. I had 0 clients, but I was sure that in 8 months I'd be in the black. And a year went by, and I'd sold $8,000 worth of services. I didn't make $8,000. Like that's the maximum that I sold.
Right.
I thought I was going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars into sales by that point in time. And so the next year I pivoted a little bit more. But those first 2.5 years, there was some struggle as I was learning the lessons I needed to learn. A lot of it was around messaging and exactly who is my customer going to be and how am I going to work at it. And then we zeroed in on our right customer with our right message and our right bundles. And then we tripled 3 years in a row, which turns into 3,000% growth. And that puts you pretty high up on the Inc. 500 list. And that did for us. But as I talk to other entrepreneurs, they tend to look at what has occurred for us in the more recent years. And I always try to remind them about the things that were going on with us in those first years. And I tell them, don't just do what I did. Like if you don't have to be quitting your job. For me, I was in the same industry, in fact, with companies we were contracted with the company that I was at. So it would have been a conflict for me to not quit my job to start my company. But as far as preparation in advance, if you can do things as a side hustle to prove your concept, prove your messaging, prove your marketing, there's so much research that you can do in advance of ever stepping off that cliff. And then the other big piece of advice is cash. Because cash is king. And I would say, if you think you've got an entrepreneurial spark in you, live below your means today. And it means things like we were living in a smaller house than we could afford by far. For years, I was driving used, paid off cars and happy about it. And somebody told me at that time, he said, whatever your plan is on your business, just expect it's going to take you twice as much time and twice as much money as you have planned. And I thought, nice piece of advice, dude, but like, I'm not an idiot and I'm working in my own industry. There's no way that's going to happen. And it
Not
was
for me, right?
Right. And it took me more than twice as much time to get anywhere successful. And what I see is a lot of entrepreneurs, they'll start a business and then they'll close their business. And a lot of them, they just don't have enough cash to make it through all of that learning stage. You can only prepare so much in your planning. You got to get out there and deal with some customers and see the challenges. And there's necessary lessons you have to learn. Most entrepreneurs don't have enough they don't have enough cash to keep them in business to learn those lessons and then to start to harvest some of those seeds that they'd planted in those early days. And so preparing in advance is really about making sure that you're going to make it through that tough stage in the beginning.
Yeah, and anticipating that stage is, it sounds like you had some wise advice early. So hopefully there are others that are hearing it from your words, paying it forward a little bit even more there, Reid. The next thing I know you wanted to touch on was this concept of always be learning. In sales, we talk about always be closing.
Yeah.
I think always be learning is much, much more important. You mentioned, kind of learning product market fit, messaging. What were some of the things that you learned early on that where you didn't know what you didn't know in marketing your new business, Reid?
I knew how to talk to people in the health insurance industry, and we sell through health insurance brokers that when they're helping set up their benefit plan, membership alongside health insurance to help balance out those high out-of-pocket costs. So I knew the broker channel, and I could speak to them real well about the challenges and issues going on inside them planning employers' benefit plans. But I wasn't that good at messaging to the employer, and I really wasn't good at messaging to the end member, the employee, who was really the one who ended up using the service. And I brought my wife into our company at about 2.5 years in, and she has this consumer marketing background, and everything that we built today as a brand and what we're known for is our messaging and our branding and our marketing. And that really came because we didn't try to build our product like all the other products in healthcare, which are very legalese in their writing and very non-member focused. But at that point, when we were going to pivot to turning it into a member focused, a real consumer brand, it all sounds good, but you've got to learn some things. And even though she had this background, she had a very corporate background in marketing. So she always had a team of people that were going to build out the website, and she was going to have a team of people that were going to let's build the spokes character, cartoon character. Let's bring in the artists. And all of a sudden it was us. And I can remember in that year, we learned so much. We started going to all kinds of podcasts, and we were going to online courses, and we were reading everything we could about developing a cartoon, like a video cartoon to tell your story. We hired a a writer to do our first video. We saw his first draft and we're like, okay, we at least got the concept. You don't understand our customer as well as us, so we're going to pick it up from here. And so often what we did was, and I had somebody ask this question. My wife Heidi and I were talking at University of Texas Entrepreneur Center last month, and somebody asked a question from the audience. He says, how do you decide how to outsource and how much you're going to outsource? And I said, in the beginning, we always went off and learned these things ourselves, and it was going online or finding experts on it, asking questions of people who were telling us that they were achieving these different things. And then we'd figure out how to do it for ourselves. We'd set it up ourselves. And then either we were going to hire somebody because it was internal core to our business, or we would then outsource it. But for us, we always wanted to learn how to do it ourselves. One, because we were doing it on the cheap. And two, it means that today we put our fingers on every single aspect of our member experience, even though we're not anymore personally involved in every single aspect of that. So it was a good example where in the development of the business, we're always learning. The very first thing we usually do if we don't know the answer to it is we go to Google and we go, well, let's go look it up and see what there is out here for education. And you spend 15 minutes online, and it is amazing how much resources there are on these things. And yet I still see some people on our team and elsewhere of people who ask us questions about things where they haven't gone and even just Googled and studied to see what's out there yet. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing about the future that we get to just rest on our laurels,
Today's growth story is about Lilliard Insurance Agency. The biggest challenge for one of their B2B sales agents was finding contact information for businesses that fit his target profile. He was running out of time to meet his monthly sales goal, so he turned to simple internet searches. Too often, the information he found was old and unreliable. He was spending too much valuable selling time looking for email addresses and phone numbers that turned out to be inaccurate and unusable anyway. The rep, Sam Hoover, heard about Sales Genie from his manager, and that's when everything changed. Sam started using Sales Genie's powerful database access to build targeted lists and get the contact information he needed to work new leads. He was able to profile his best customers to find prospects that looked just like them. He even used Sales Genie to find ways to reach them with direct mail, email, and online marketing campaigns. Sam immediately increased his monthly sales production by 200%. Can Sales Genie help you drive similar sales results? Probably. Head over to salesgenie.com/B2B to get a demo and a free customer analysis. All right, let's get back into the show. Yeah, it comes full circle. You're still constantly learning as you lead your team. The thing I like there, Reid, is that that culture of consistently learning in the early stages of your business has carried over into this aspect of the culture of your company where you're not just looking it up, but it sounds like you're teaching this concept of always be learning and fostering this learning culture within your business so that you empower them to solve problems, to find answers as well. I think that's a very powerful lesson there. Reid, you also wanted to talk about this idea in your third tip in approaching change is, realizing that it is a constant, something that I think we all know, but it takes being hit over the head with several times sometimes for us to realize that change is a constant. What are some of the things that you think folks leading teams, building businesses should keep in mind here as they continue to scale up?
Well, I'm inside the health insurance industry. And it's funny, I'll be talking to people and they'll be saying, gosh, there's just so much change going on in healthcare right now. Oh, woe is me. It's tough. And, I'll kind of smack them nicely with the velvet hammer and say, pick an industry. Like, you can't be an undertaker today and not be in the middle of dramatic change on what people are expecting about how you're going to be running your business. So first of all, stop whining about the fact that there's so much change and just accept it. No business is sitting still these days. So on constant change, you better be, as you're building a company, be building it into the culture and the DNA of your team. You've got to prepare your team for the idea of change and growth and that you're never fully sitting still. Mm-hmm. Specifically, when you're recruiting new people, look for people that are fast learners. Look away from the people that have been doing exactly the same kind of job, exactly the same kind of way for years, and think that they're just going to have an easy time coming into your company. And it's one of those things in that first 90 days or so of somebody's initial time with us. If we see people just can't keep up with learning a lot, it's time for them to go find somewhere else, because they're not going to be happy inside our company after a couple of years, because it just keeps coming. And then the other is, you've got to get back to this lesson that sounds like, coming from a sports coach in high school, but every failure is a step forward. So you've got to build this culture into your team where you're not penalizing people for the failures that they're having. In fact, you're encouraging and rewarding their willingness to go and try something. As a small business, you think about what the small business's greatest strength is in the market. It's their ability to pivot and change, right? It's their nimbleness. And yet then you start to build a company for a bit. And there was a point about 4 years ago, we had just come off of our third year of tripling in size. And I was starting to feel that the competition in the marketplace was shifting a bit. And we were having a retreat, and it wasn't a very big team at the time, but I said to them, okay, I think we need to completely change up our product bundles this year, and we needed to go in a different direction. And they looked at me like I had a third arm growing, right out of my forehead. They're like, "What are you talking about? Everything's going well. We just have our processes down. We don't want to change." And I'm like, "No, we have to change." And that day I did not win them over, but we did get them won over. And 6 months later, we brought out a whole new generation. And then this spring, we hit that same sort of time again, where we saw that the market was shifting a bit again. We brought in some new vendors. And it was interesting in May when I told my team, "Okay, guys, we need a whole new generation of a bundle." And on the very day that we spoke to them, they did not one person pushed back and said, "No, we don't need to do this." And part of it is, and this is part of the lesson on this constantly change. When you build a culture that works like this, on that day, they all said, "Okay, I got you. We're going to turn this corner. We can't see around the corner, but we trust that you're looking around the corner. And if you're saying we need to go there and that it's going to be better, we're with you." And we're super excited about the team's ability to move forward and execute and be willing to take that step forward. So a couple of tips on that. Probably the biggest one is you've got to work with your team and explain to them why you're making some of the decisions that you are along the way. Tell them in advance why you're making the decisions. Tell them while you're making the decisions and making the change. And then retell these cultural stories. Like, to the new employee who comes in, retell the story of what was going on that year when we came off of our third year of tripling in size, and why we made a change and how that played out, so that they can understand the thought process, and there becomes this trust from them. So when you're describing the past influences that are going on in the marketplace and the decisions that you're making, and then describe the issues that are leading up now to the upcoming decisions, you're teaching your people along the way to look around corners. And whether they even see around the corner, you're at least trusting them that, okay, we can put on the gas here. We trust you enough that we're going to do this, and force that kind of culture onto your team. And yet, when you make it part of your core values, you can dramatically take people that weren't that used to that kind of change and really achieve with it. And it doesn't have to stop as you grow as a company. One of the people who's one of our executives, Tanya, we hired her away from Amazon, actually. She was one of the senior executives at Amazon. Yeah, seriously, wow. And she's, to this day, it's one of the biggest culture lessons she got out of working at Amazon. And that culturally, internally, even Amazon has learned how to keep this culture and with what they call a day one mindset. It's okay, we're just at day one and we're just starting again today. And they have built a huge company who still has this constant change mentality. They didn't get buried in inertia. So with constant change, that's the biggies from us.
Yeah, I love that. There's some powerful lessons there. And, mentioning Amazon, I was just seeing a post on social last night about companies that once were the 900-pound gorilla in their industry. They were the name, and then they totally got blindsided by disruption and change. And some of those were knocked out by Amazon, Toys R Us being one of them, Blockbuster by Netflix, all of those sorts. So I think this is great reminders for folks. Reid, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Love what you guys are doing in continuing to grow and sharing your growth story. If anyone listening to this, Reid, would like to stay connected with you, ask any follow-up questions, or learn more about what you and the team at Fresh Bennies are up to these days, what's the best way for them to go about reaching out?
Sure. Well, Fresh Bennies is spelled Freshbenies, but we know that you're not necessarily going to spell it correctly. So whether you spell it that way.com or probably one of the other ways that's close to freshbenies.com, you'll find our website. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Reid Rasmussen, Reid Rasmussen. And there aren't many of us, and I'm the only one that is tied to Fresh Bennies. So would be happy to connect with anybody.
Love it. Reid, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure, man.
Thanks so much, Logan. Appreciate it.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. All those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.